Hi guys and welcome. Today I want to show you how to make 3 indulgent and absolutely delicious one-pot recipes that go great with sourdough. The inspiration for this video came when my partner started baking sourdough at work, and whenever he would try out a new technique or test a new recipe, he would bring a loaf home, and all of a sudden I started having a lot of great sourdough at home, and I kind of found myself planning my meals around the bread. Like, for example, when you have a good bottle of wine and you plan your whole meal around the bottle, I'm sharing recipes that, in my opinion, can make your loaf of bread the star of the show. That said, of course, you can enjoy these dishes with any other side of your preference. The first recipe that we are going to make is this creamy artichoke and cannellini bean deliciousness. Big leaf spinach is in the season here, but feel free to use frozen or sub it with kale or chards. Capers usually come in a salty vinegar brine, but when it comes to artichokes, you have a few options. I prefer artichoke hearts in oil, but frozen or the saltwater ones would work great too. It's nice to have all the ingredients chopped and ready to go because none of them take long to cook. We are going to fry everything in a generous amount of olive oil. I like adding the ingredients one by one, starting with the artichokes. In this recipe, like in many others, the key to flavor is caramelization. Use a wide pot or a Dutch oven if you have one, because it will give you space for all the ingredients to turn golden brown. Be very careful with your garlic and flour. The moment you see a golden color, add a splash of water to pick up that fawn. Then go in with soy milk. Let the sauce thicken for a little bit and then add spinach, wilt it down, and go in with cannellini beans. To finish, I like to stir in a generous amount of nutritional yeast for that rounding umami flavor. I think chives make a great topping for this dish. I also like adding a splash of olive oil and some more nutritional yeast. Oh, this looks so creamy and rich. Let's give it a taste. I really love this next recipe because creamy meets tangy and it's so savory and deep. It has a bit of smokiness from smoked paprika. We'll use some fresh herbs and it's going to be absolutely delicious. If you don't have any fresh herbs on hand, just use dried. In this case, a mix of Mediterranean herbs would be a really good choice. So let's start by chopping the veggies. Red onion would go really well in this dish, but I only had yellow at home. I'm using a mild chili variety called Brazilian starfish. If you don't have fresh chilies, you can use chili flakes or chili powder. Also, heat is not the key element in this dish, and you can just skip the chilies altogether if you're not a fan of spicy food. Before I cut my tomatoes, I'm going to use the same pot that we're gonna cook in to blanch the tomatoes because I really want to take the skin off. You don't have to do it, it just makes the texture nicer because you don't have like pieces of tomato skin floating around in your dish. You don't have to use fresh tomatoes, you can definitely use canned. It's still the season here, so I'm using fresh, but this recipe would work great with canned tomatoes. Heat your pot and add a generous amount of olive oil. Start by frying the onions. When they turn translucent, go in with the bell pepper. Let the veggies caramelize. A couple minutes before adding the tomatoes, give your chilies and cumin a light fry. I like frying my paprika powder too, but be careful. Have the tomatoes ready because it takes only seconds for it to burn. If your pan is very hot, don't risk it, just add the paprika after the tomatoes. I let everything cook down for a little bit and then add the olives. I'm going to leave the herbs whole because I want to put them in just for a brief moment and use them to flavor the food, but then take them out later. Depending on your tomatoes, you might need a splash of water to ensure that nothing sticks while you are melting the almond cream. This is by a brand called Vivre Vert. Not sponsored, I just really like their almond spread, so I decided to try this one. It's very soft but cuts nicely. You'll see it works really well in this dish. I like to cover my pot and leave it on low heat for 5 minutes. Alternatively, you could put it in the oven uncovered to get a nice golden top. Just make sure your pot is oven safe. This would make a great dip, but here I decided to serve it on sliced bread with some fresh basil. I really enjoyed the bites where there's a piece of olive in it. The freshness and tanginess from the olives really balances nicely with the creamy almond delight. I'm absolutely stoked about this. I've also tried making this recipe using silken tofu and tofu ricotta, but I have to say the creamy almond delight goes so well in this one. It balances the tanginess and the flavors just pop. For our final recipe today, we basically have a hug in a bowl. It's a lentil and cannellini bean soup. This dish is very rich in protein, so it's gonna keep you full for long. And the spices are warming, delicious, and very, very comforting. Just like in the previous recipe, I'm gonna start by blanching our tomatoes. There was a moment in my life when I worked as a cook in a mountain school in the Nepali Himalayas, and this soup was something I was making every day. I would of course play around with the ingredients a little bit, but it was pretty much always centered around spices, lentils, alliums, and pulses. I think every Nepali and Indian family has their version of dal or lentil soup. Traditionally, it's served with rice, veggies, pickles, greens, and some homemade bread. Start by frying your onion and mushrooms. The key to flavor in this recipe is blooming your aromatics and spices in hot oil. Shiitakes are not very traditional in Nepali dal, but I find they add a nice touch of umami. Cumin goes in first. I like adding a little extra oil here so it fries properly. Then I add garlic, chili, and the fenugreek. Fenugreek turns very bitter when it burns, so be careful. Ground spices go in after the tomatoes. My camera cut for a moment here, but all I did was add lentils and water. Now I'm going to mash my beans with a fork in this little bowl. I know this is a one-pot recipe and you can definitely either skip this step or you could mash them in the pot while you're cooking. The bowl, in my case, is already dirty, so I'm just gonna use it to mash the beans. The lentils usually take around 15 minutes to cook and then the soup is ready. I love serving it with fresh coriander. If coriander tastes like soap to you, then try using dried fenugreek leaves instead, or maybe Thai basil or lemon basil. It's time to taste. Comforting, filling. Lentil soup is definitely on my weekly rotation. Thank you so much for watching, for being here and supporting me. I'm at the very beginning of my journey, so each of your interactions with my content really helps me out a lot. And yeah, I'm just excited to be doing this, excited to be filming this, and really looking forward to seeing you in the next video.